I'm Julie Denslow, and we are at the 50th anniversary meeting of the Association for Tropical Biology and Conservation in San Jose, Costa Rica, and I'm talking to Jack Putz, who's a professor at the University of Florida. And Jack, to start out, say something about what pulled you to the tropics and what were the influences that set off your early experiences?
Well, Julie, I think it goes way, way back. My father was a World War II veteran. He was in the Flying Tigers.
Really?
And he flew over the Himalayas and landed in Kunming, which is now a big center for tropical botany. And he was imprisoned in Burma and all kinds of war stories there. But I grew up with tales of exotic places, particularly in Asia, playing with his coins and hearing his stories. And every Sunday afternoon watching a Tarzan movie, and that was so. From a very early age, I wanted to go to exotic places, particularly in Asia. When I first applied to the Peace Corps, I was rejected, but I was 15, and my major asset was a fast-breaking curveball, which I thought in a place like Venezuela would have been very useful, but I didn't get in. And then I went to university during the Vietnam years and ended up in a tropical biology course at the University of Wisconsin with Julie Denslow, among others. Took an ecology course, and Dave and Debbie Clark were my TAs. And then did get into the Peace Corps after teaching high school for a while. And I was in Malaysia, which wasn't where I wanted to be. I wanted to be in Indonesia because of the gamelan music and so forth. But Malaysia was as close as I could get because of Sukarno. That really started it. And I was several years as a Peace Corps volunteer, starting in 1973. And what is this? 40 years later, I'm still doing pretty much the same thing. I've gotten really good at it. I'm real fast with a diameter tape, and I can put in a hectare plot in record time, and still doing the same kind of work. After Peace Corps, I came back and went to graduate school at Cornell, and applied to go back and continue to my Peace Corps research on rattans in Malaysia. I already had agreements with everyone, but it didn't get funded by National Science Foundation, and I quickly scratched out rattans and put in lianas, and scratched out Malaysia and put in Panama, made a few more cosmetic changes, and got a fellowship from the Smithsonian in Panama. So I went there, and there was another interlude in Amazonian Venezuela with a project with Carl Jordan, but I first became associated with OTS when I was just finishing my PhD and was the teaching assistant on a course, and must have been 1980 or 81, and that was a great experience. I'd never been an OTS student, which was a real mistake. I made the mistake that a lot of students are making today. It was I didn't need an introduction to tropical ecology. I'd been 4 years in the tropics, or 8, or whatever it was by that point. But what I learned in OTS, in teaching OTS courses and participating in various ways, was about science as much as about tropical ecology. So after TAing, I finished my dissertation. I got a job at the University of Florida, where I've been since. Started in 1982 and haven't moved on very far, but continued to teach OTS courses. So after that, I coordinated one, co-coordinated a couple, and was a resource person on, I don't know, a dozen or so. And I was doing research in Costa Rica as well, in Monteverde. I married Claudia Romero, and she did her master's research in the Talamancas and Cerro La Muerte on the compatibility of moss and liverwort harvesting with forest management. And so that was back in Costa Rica, back with OTS. But we realized that there were two developments in our lives. One was that we had experience in other countries me in Asia, Claudia all over Latin America, had language abilities other than just Spanish, and had interests that had drifted back to my roots, which were in forestry. Forest management is a conservation strategy. So then it was interesting. With Pete Feinsinger, I taught a course in Ecuador that was pure OTS approach with field problems and all that, and that was wonderful. And then struck out on my own, and with Claudia, teaching field courses all around the world, using the OTS model of experiential learning and field problems and course books, and it's very much OTS. And at that point, early on, I went to talk to Don Stone, much beloved long-term director of OTS, and I said, Don, you know, I'm using the OTS model, I'm teaching OTS courses all over the world, and you know, what kind of affiliation should I have with OTS? And he said, well, I'm very happy that you're doing that. I don't see any real reason why you would be directly affiliated with OTS. You know, we're expensive, you know, and you're running, you know, very shoestring budget operations that are very successful, and go for it with my blessings and the blessings of OTS, and if we can be of help. So since then, I think I've only taught on one OTS course, and that was in Peru with ACA and at Rio de los Amigos. It was great. It was Peruvian students. I was in Peru anyway on a sabbatical in Iquitos, and reminded me of a lot of the strengths of OTS. But since then, I've taught OTS courses that are in a 2-week format with local students, and a couple in Malaysia, well, actually separated by 15 years. And I asked them, why did it take 15 years to have me back? And they said, well, it took about that long to recover. You know, they're very energetic courses. A couple in Indonesia, where we'll be teaching OTS courses for the next couple of years, because we just got funding to do that. And last year was in Gabon, my first time in Congo Basin, and that was fun. And Gabonese are very tolerant of my personal Esperanto, which has some French, a little Spanish, and a lot of Indonesian. And luckily, I was team teaching with a former PhD student from the Central African Republic, and after I would give some long explanation in some combination of, in a foreign language, which resembled French in some ways, then he would explain what was actually going on. And we had a blast. And it was a great introduction to Gabon. Couple courses in Bolivia. And where else? So just having Suriname and Guyana, which has been fabulous, because that's where I've gotten a couple great graduate students that one's come to the University of Florida, one's at the University of Suriname, and I'm her advisor there. And so this is a recruiting tool. It's fabulous, as I think that these courses, like normal, formal OTS courses, contribute a lot to scientific capacity. They build teams. We always have, like the course in Suriname had a couple students from Guyana, and vice versa. And I usually bring a TA who's from to help teach the course, a PhD student, but from another developing country. And so that's a wonderful mix, and they end up collaborating. And it's just been, that 2 or 3 weeks every year has felt like perhaps one of my bigger contributions to tropical conservation through improved forest management. And the courses have evolved, a lot more economics, a lot more political science now, still focusing on critical thinking skills and experimental design and writing and rewriting and rewriting, and that OTS model. The course books are much used in the library in Sepilok in Sabah, in Malaysia and Borneo. I think the course book is one of the most used books in the whole library, which is remarkable. I see, students will then take projects that they did and turn them into theses and publications. It happens more than occasionally. And so I'm gratified by that. And it's just this network of younger collaborators that's just really, it's part of the OTS experience. And so that, in this 50th anniversary, I finally learned where that model of teaching came from, well before anyone was talking about experiential learning and flipping classrooms and all that. We were doing that, and I guess Dan Jensen was one of the principal architects of that pedagogical approach, which is just nice to know. I have a lot of respect for him, and it's nice to see where we got that, because it's still effective. And it's what I do in Florida. But with Florida, we do it with fire ecology and exotic species. In the tropics, we do it with logging and post-logging silvicultural treatments and things like that. But in all cases, with some political science and policy interventions, with some economics and a lot of ecology. So that's...
Jack, I think you're one of the few people I know that has taught in the OTS model in so many different cultures. Can you do some comparisons, or what are your insights about how to adjust the course, or how it works under different traditions of students questioning their professors, for example, or how they interact with each other, or how well prepared they have been, or how comfortable they are with reading scientific literature?
Well, I guess the anecdote that I can relate that probably best exemplifies the kind of issues that you deal with is teaching in Borneo, in Malaysian Borneo, where you have a very mixed ethnicity of more indigenous, everybody's indigenous, I suppose, but
yeah.
Kadazan and Bidayus and Malays and Chinese and so forth, in these mixed classes, but or mixed ethnicities. But one of the things they share is a very hierarchical view of the world, with men on top. And I really like teaching with my wife, Claudia Romero, who's Colombian, and she's a very much Colombian, she's a firebrand. And I remember we were in the Meliao Basin in the first days of the chorus in Malaysia, and a beautiful place. And Claudia was getting increasingly frustrated by the fact that everyone would always turn to me rather than using her for her expertise. And so we always argue. We never agree on almost anything, at least in public. And that is what broke the ice there. When I would make some pronouncement and she would just contradict me. And it was like, that was okay, that she could contradict me. And then we'd be snappy back and forth to each other. Oh, that's a ridiculous, oh, no. And then more than half the time, probably, she's right. And then, okay, I'll concede. Not with grace, but I'll concede. And then the students come to realize that on issues that are very quantitative, she's a much better mathematician than I am, on issues of economics, she was really the go-to person. And there were women on the course, but they were doing the same thing. They were disregarding her and turning to me because I was older and male and larger. I don't know if that size matters, but, and then after that, it got much more equal, and it was really good for the female participants because they could see this very strong woman was challenging an older male, and it was okay. And so culturally that was very challenging. But and to contrast that, what you often have to do is bait people and try to evoke a response. I also taught for a couple years in the Netherlands, and Dutch are the opposite of Asians. I mean, you don't have to, I mean, you're not halfway through the first sentence and the students are all over you with, their response to it and their objections and so forth. So, but that's been fun, and it's one of the big challenges that I really like of teaching internationally, because every place is different. And what helps me, and now increasingly as I get older, and the students are increasingly reluctant to question my judgment, is that I'm going to new places where I know very little. And that becomes apparent very quickly. And they know a lot about their place. What I know a lot about is hypothesis formulation and experimental design and writing and those things. But I don't know, what's that tree? I don't know what that tree is. Or find me, I need a plant that does this. Or what soil is this? And then they have that expertise. And then it becomes, as an OTS course, and its best is it's participants and everyone is learning. And that's that's also a legacy, I think, of OTS and its birth in the 60s and that egalitarian approach and that learning together spirit, which I try to bring to all of these courses. So I really attribute a lot to those years of direct affiliation with OTS.
What are you finding in with regard to the interest of your students in, say, biodiversity issues, management issues, use of technology-heavy projects and so forth? Are you seeing shifts over the years? Or are you seeing differences in cultures and in different...
Well, my own research has always been a mixture of curiosity-driven and applied. As the years have gone by, it's gotten more and more applied. I still have projects that are entirely just blue sky research, but I could say that I also see that with the participants in my field courses and my students at the University of Florida as well, that they're getting more interested in making a difference in terms of how resources are managed. But there's a lot of bias in that statement, I think, that I'm looking for people who want to solve real world problems, and particularly in relation to forest management. And I'm afraid I have to go chair a session. So I am going to have to run away.
Well, thank you for coming, Jack.
It's my great pleasure,
Grateful
Julie.
for you to be here. It's lovely to get you in this project.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.